Hey, I'm Sara Gonzales. Welcome to the news and why it matters. The top story today, we have all agreed, is not Andrew Heaton's dating life.
No.
But, Glenn, what was the top story for you instead?
I'm torn again today. I think the recount to some degree, but I actually think this thing with Melania Trump is interesting, really fascinating.
Yeah, the breaking news with what she said, Stu.
That's a very bizarre story.
Yeah, it is.
I would go with the government is here to protect our children, and finally they're stepping up and doing their job.
Oh, thank goodness.
Finally.
Finally, because that's what we need from them.
Yes, Andrew.
France.
Okay.
All right.
Let's talk about France.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you,
Sorry,
Rain Man.
Andrew.
We appreciate the...
I love you, Andrew. I think you're hysterical.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So you have the one.
This is a really nice way to begin the program. This is nice.
All right, Glenn.
Okay, so we don't know an awful lot yet, except that for the first time in history, well, probably since, I don't know, Martha Washington, or there had to be one of them back then before television, where they're like, you get that tramp out of here. But Melania Trump has said, who is it, the title, do you remember?
John Bolton's number 2, right?
Yeah. So said, this person should not have the honor of working at the White House anymore. I want them out. The first lady.
A public statement from her office.
Right. That's like, I don't know what you have to do.
John Bolton's undersecretary
Yes.
or something?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like deputy.
Yeah.
And she was escorted out of the building.
Was she? Oh, I didn't read that.
That's all I
So
just
like,
said.
what? I mean,
you
let's pretend we're CNN. Let's speculate on the worst things that could have happened.
And find a way to blame Don
Does the
for
First
it.
Lady's office interact with the Department of National Defense Advisor or whatever
No, I
John
mean,
Bolton is?
Big.
Yeah.
Now, context here is kind of important today in that there was a big story that came out that the First Lady's office was going and having all sorts of problems with John Kelly. And I don't know, there's some shakeup going on there with the First Lady, and that she was upset that some of her aides that she wanted to come on certain trips were not being allowed to, and then they wouldn't plan the travel appropriately, like they'd show up in cities and wouldn't have hotel rooms booked. And
Can you imagine that?
I mean,
That's something that if I'm the first dad,
the president?
okay, sure.
Okay.
I would walk in to my chief of staff and say two things. One, what the hell is wrong with you?
Yep.
She's the first lady. She's traveling with me, and she's got her people.
Yeah.
Book them a freaking hotel room. A, how dare you do that to the first lady? B, I don't need to hear this from my wife when I get home. Yeah. Stop it. Happy wife, happy life. Learn that.
I will say B was the one that was reported in the story that Donald Trump actually said that. Yeah, I was like, look, you don't. I mean, I don't. I've got enough to worry about on the President of the United States. Maybe don't have me, give me these hassles about what my wife is saying about booking travel for her, coworkers. It is a bizarre.
I will
series
tell
of
you.
What do you think happened?
I will tell you. I'm not going to speculate. I'm not CNN.
I thought you said we're supposed to speculate.
I said, let's pretend we're CNN. If you all want to pretend you're CNN and you pretend at home that you're a CNN watcher, we can do that. But, it's just, and maybe it's because I've spent time with Tanya's family, where there comes a point in a relationship, at least with the family from the old country, where all of a sudden it switches languages. And now it's in Italian, and it's very animated, and there's a lot of famagats kind of stuff happening. You're like, I think that might be a swear word, but I'm not sure. It's either food or a swear word. That's probably what happens with Donald. All of a sudden, if a fuse is lit, she's got to launch into a lot of whatever country she's from.
I think she's Hungary, right? Is she Hungary?
No, Slovenia.
That's
Yes.
Slovenia. You're right. Slovenia. Yeah.
So she's, she'll slide right into Slovenese.
Slovene?
Yeah.
Slovene.
Slovene, that sounds right.
Slovene.
Yeah.
And that's the last
You
thing.
nailed that accent, by the way. Perfect Slovenian accent.
That's exactly what it is.
Well, you bet.
Textbook.
Yeah.
It is interesting too. She was, her story is amazing. She was born in the former Soviet Union. Think about that. The First Lady of the United States was born in the Soviet Union.
I can go one better. Her father was a communist leader. He was a Communist Party leader.
What I'm hearing is Manchurian candidate. This is actually a really, really.
Now we're doing
Gorbachev's
CNN. Now we're
actually
there.
pulling the strings behind it. He's like, 4 more years, we come back.
I mean, in contrast, I think it's an amazing story, right? Like, here's someone who I mean, we're talking about the ultimate victory of capitalism over communism, right? The Soviet Union's gone, and now the woman born inside of it not only doesn't have the country doesn't even exist, but now she's in another country and she's First Lady of the United States. It's a great story.
And she's telling the Chief of Staff of the White House, get rid of them.
Yeah, that is amazing. I have absolutely no idea yet what has gone on with this story. It's just I just have a bunch of question marks bouncing around in my brain.
She also gets a lot of unnecessary flack. Like I'm generally of the opinion you really shouldn't go after first ladies anyway. I mean, they didn't run for office. They happen to be with their husband. But, like she's like quadrilingual or something.
No, she's really bright.
Yeah, she's like a really smart model that the worst case scenario is she's a gold digger, but the best case scenario and that's not enough that you should go after and be mean to her and stuff. The best case scenario is she married a rich guy and wound up becoming the first lady.
Well, I think the only
You know what?
Yeah.
He advertises himself as somebody who wants gold diggers. I don't think she's like, oh, I'm going to get one over. He's practically, have sex with me. I'll pay you this much if you stay with me this amount of years.
Did not meet that mental limit.
Certainly in that day, he was definitely doing that stuff.
He
right? I
was.
mean, we remember there was a segment that actually our syndicator carried for many years. It was like a Donald Trump minute. And it was called Trumped or something like that. It was, he would come in and do a commentary every day about the news of the day.
What?
It's crazy.
Oh, yeah.
And no one could dig up the archive of these things because,
This has been buried in a dump with 3 people shot and no one can find this now. Donald Trump would do a minute
on our network. We had access to it. We didn't save it. We used to make fun of it.
Oh, we used to put him on the air all the time and just make fun of what he was talking about. And it was to the point of during the campaign, it was people were really BuzzFeed was trying to get them, and they came up with a couple of them. We had one that we had from an old show, and because we were making fun of it. And his commentary was, "I just got married to Melania. At some point, I won't be married to her anymore. I made sure I got a prenuptial agreement." That's basically his entire point of the commentary.
Way to kick off
He's like, at some point, probably we won't be married anymore.
But that's not a surprise.
Yeah, that's
his
how he
own
was.
book, he says, I was walking down the aisle with Melania thinking, what am I doing? I'm already bored. Whoa!
I can't wait for my future husband to think that.
You know what? I think he is. I think not only in this case, I think he's become wildly protective of her. I think no matter what you can say about Donald Trump and his relationship, I can't imagine that any man can stand by and see the mother of his children treated like the press has treated her, and stand by and not be defensive. He could, we could find out in 1,000 years from now that he hated her guts the whole time, but he will defend her. Now I think it's wrong what the press does to her.
Before we move on, do you think that we're going to find out exactly what happened?
Yes, I do.
I
do think we will. Yeah. I mean, I don't know that it's anything salacious or anything. It's got to be. I think it could very well be related to this other story. Like, why on the same day? It's hard to believe that the story about Kelly and all of the people surrounding him and this happened on the same day. Yeah. I mean, it's very odd. She's been very quiet. She hasn't spoken up at all.
She is so into this one niche of missile defense policy. Yeah. That's the one thing that she's just hardcore about.
Right?
How dare you, Undersecretary of the
her handler. Because
That's
her
right.
handler
because
told
Mikhail
her,
Gorbachev.
when you get into that position, you get this one line changed in the missile defense treaties.
Before we move on, I want to thank our sponsor, Riduzone. So the holidays are coming up, and there's going to be Thanksgiving, there's going to be Christmas, there's going to be New Year's Eve parties.
Good thing there's not going to be a lot of cookies and food.
Right. So we're all going to be
factor in
gorging
20
ourselves.
pounds, right? You factor in 20 pounds from here to the end of the year.
20 pounds?
And then another 10.
1,000.
What?
I'm at 1,000. Another 20 pounds, and I hit 1,000.
I can feel my thighs now.
Oh, really? Oh, good.
It's new. It's unpleasant. I don't like it. About 2 years.
But I mean, seriously, we all plan to gain a little bit of weight over the holidays. We all overeat.
We all don't.
We gorge ourselves like the greedy Americans that we are.
Good for us.
But I have a solution for you, Riduzone. It helps boost your metabolism and it helps with the cravings. So you can be like me and be super boring and not gain any weight over the holidays, yes, and not feel like I'm constantly wanting pumpkin pie and all these other, okay, I will still want it, but I won't eat it because of Riduzone. So you can go to riduzone.com and use promo code THEBLAZE. You can get 30% off a 3-month supply. And we did the math for you. It's $1.79 a day. I thank you for this anthem right now. It's $1.79 a day.
That's great.
Invest in your health. It's very cheap. Stu.
Yes.
The government is finally taking care of our children.
Finally.
Yeah.
They've been letting us down for too long. They've been allowing us to parent our own children. That's not how this is supposed to
They've been
work.
allowing us for really too long.
Too long. We shouldn't have any input in how our children are raised.
Brother.
And I'm glad we're going to finally turn this one around. This is an amazing story, actually. A daycare, I put that in air quotes because it's not really a daycare, but it was this thing at a Lutheran church in D.C. where, it's been going on for 40 years, I think, a long time. And basically it was an informal get-together gathering of young kids with their parents, and they would have time to socialize and kind of hang out together. And
they just turned a blind eye to
They turned a blind eye to this for 40 years. Finally, they're stepping in, and they're making sure they take care of this. It's an amazing thing because this had become such a popular thing at this church. And people really got a lot out of it, and it was great, and everyone was happy. As they went through time, they said, well, how can we improve this? And they said, well, when you're dropping off your kids, we'll get maybe an emergency contact number so they wouldn't, we'd be able to get in touch in case something happened. And then, and they made some rules. Parents signed some forms that said, hey, if your kid's sick, you're not going to bring them here because we don't want to spread the, sickness and everything. That is apparently not allowed. You're not allowed to do that. The issue is it is an informal gathering if you don't ask for these forms. If you do ask for these forms, it's a daycare that must be licensed by the government. So the government is now threatening to shut them down. Again, multiple decades.
I never wanted Jesus to appear with lightning bolts more than right now.
Right now, right?
You know what I mean?
So if they were to be less safe, if they were able to say, well, we don't want your emergency contact number, and we don't want you to tell us if your kids are sick when you bring them here, if that happened, then they'd be completely fine and they can continue.
So this goes to the biggest problem that government makes people into criminals. It makes you into criminals because what then you do is like, oh, I can't ask that. Then you bring your child and you're like, so I'm not asking you if they're sick or anything, so I couldn't hear that. And you just start finding ways around the law to get it done. Government rules make people into criminals. It just does.
Can I have a complaint about state bureaucracy that kind of ties along with this?
Yeah.
That so I went and had lunch with my son, and they're the nutrition guidelines, right, for school lunches. He'd never bought hot lunch before. It was a big deal for him. I pack his lunch every day, and it's like kale and other gross stuff that you guys won't eat. But he was so excited about doing hot lunch, but he was really intimidated by the system. So I said, I will go to lunch with you one day. I'll help you. We'll do it together. So with the nutrition guidelines that they have, the kids can either choose from entree, chicken and rice, or sugared yogurt and a chocolate chip mini loaf.
Gee, which one?
Which kid is chewing the chicken and rice?
Right? So then I'm like, he's super excited. He's like, oh, I want the yogurt. I'm like, okay, that's fine, but don't get fruit instead. No, you can't have chocolate milk on top of that. It's terrible. Every time the government gets involved in anything like that, in any kind of guidelines, it's awful.
I covered a thing in my podcast yesterday, shout out. Something's off with Andrew Heaton. And there was a guy in Potter, Nebraska that got let go from his job as a cook because he'd smuggled in kangaroo meat. And he got caught, and he's like, look, kangaroo meat, it does meet all of the federal guidelines. It's actually leaner than what we serve. And I'm like, of course it's better than what you serve. I went to public schools as well. And kangaroo, what I'm curious is how he got the kangaroo meat, because he's in Potter, Nebraska. I don't know. When I look at the story...
Wait, is he smuggling in kangaroos?
I really thought of it. This is what I spend my time thinking about.
Yeah, right.
I read this, it's like, ha, funny story. And I'm like, he's in Potter, Nebraska. He has to special order that stuff. You don't go to Walmart in Potter, Nebraska for kangaroo. I think he hit a kangaroo with his car. I think it escaped from the zoo. He had a kangaroo with his car, and then he disposed of the evidence. So that's my
Can I tell you
theory.
something? In the summer, we go up to our ranch, and I live in a small town, 500 people. We were following this woman. She was going to work. She comes around the corner. We're up in the mountain. She comes around a corner. Deer comes. She hits the deer. The deer goes off into the side. We get out of the car. We run to the window, and we're like, are you okay? Her window is broken, okay? And she is just kind of looking down. We think she's stunned. And she says, is there any blood on my dress? This is a brand new dress. If this dress has blood on it, we're like, no, are you okay? And she's like, fine. Have you seen the deer? Is the deer dead? And we're like, we just rushed to you. And she's like, well, do you have a gun? Shoot the deer if it's not dead. We're like, okay, I'm not sure if that's... She just gets out of her car. She grabs a pistol out of her... Boom! Shoots. And she said, do you want it? If not, I'm going to call my husband, and he'll come by and pick it up.
Can she be governor of the state she's in? She sounds like a can-do woman.
She was great. She's like, now I've got to get my car fixed. I was going out to lunch today. Oh, it's not the way to start your day. I love that.
True feminist icon.
People are different. There could be somebody raising kangaroos.
Okay, yeah, I'll take that, yeah.
All right, back in a minute.
I feel like he took like a strong ideological stance of on kangaroo meat. And it's like, I want people to eat this, and then the only way they'll do it is so I don't tell them, and then they'll like it afterwards.
You love it, right. And like
Andrew.
Rats and things?
France, you weirdo.
Yeah, we're going to talk about France. So there's a little bit of a backstory to this. I'm going to start with the tweet that President Trump shot off today towards French President Macron. There you go. Okay, there we are.
Oh, there it is.
Emmanuel Macron suggests building its own army to protect Europe against the U.S., China, and Russia. But it was Germany in World Wars I and II. How did that work out for France? They were starting to learn German in Paris before the U.S. came along. Pay for NATO or not. So a friendly, neighborly tweet from the U.S. president to the French president, and they've been having kind of a spat back and forth. There's two things to unpack here. The first is that last week, President Macron said we need to build up a European military in order to protect ourselves from Russia, China, and the U.S., implying that we might be an actual foe of France.
We might be. French pissed me off. If they had their own army, we'd consider it. I would, at least. Who's with me?
You know what? See, this is where I'm going to come in here, and I'm not an interventionist. I don't want to invade any other countries, but Europe has been great at sucking people into wars for the last 2,000 years, and I want to keep Europe and America on the same civilizational footing, which I think is what's brilliant about NATO, and what George H.W. Bush doesn't get sufficient credit for, is when communism was collapsing, NATO that had been formed to keep Europe and us against Russia. Russia's now absent that equation, and we went, well, let's go ahead and keep the civilizational block going. And so I'm quite worried that that's beginning to atrophy. I think a lot of it's hot air between both Macron and Trump.
Yeah.
But I would not like the Europeans to form their own army that's contravened to our own. I'd like us to stay on the same page.
So, whatever. I'm so sick of being over there and protecting them and pulling their sorry asses out of every problem that they've ever had. I'm sick of it. NATO has worked fairly well, but really it was the nuclear weapon that worked really well. Everybody was like, don't screw with them. They've got more of those than we do. And that kind of, solves an awful lot of problems. The real issue is, this block, this civilization, this Western civilization block, it's gone. It's gone. If you look what is happening right now, we talked to a guy in the UK today about, they are terrified of the Muslim migrants that they brought in that are all, extreme. I don't want to say all of the Muslims are, but the Islamists that they brought in.
There's enough of them that are extreme that they're terrified of it.
They're terrified. They're cutting the guy's head off in the street, 2 years ago? Just seeing a guy walking down the street, oh, you were a soldier for the military, chopped his head off in the street, and nobody did anything.
This is in the UK?
In the UK. They have thousands of children that have been sexually abused and used in this sex ring. The parents have taken their children to the police station and say, tell them what you just told us. And the police will say, we can't do anything about it. They've lost it already. If they don't find it within themselves to stand up for Western civilization, they're not going to be of any use to anybody. And I will tell you that every time somebody does try to step up, they're immediately painted as a fascist and a Nazi. And yes, those do come from Europe. There are a lot of those guys. But you've got to be able to separate the ones who are just saying, no, I just think this is a danger. We shouldn't have Sharia law on top of English law. We have one of the two. You want Sharia law? Go someplace else that has Sharia law. We have English law. Until somebody does that, and not because they're racist or anything else, Europe's gone.
Yeah. Before we move on, I want to thank our sponsor, iTarget Pro. I have been loving my iTarget Pro.
I love our iTarget Pro. The great way to get good at firing. I just don't have time to go to the gun range as much as I like.
It's also expensive.
It's really expensive. It's really
because you got the gun range fees and you've got the ammo.
Yeah,
so it's a double whammy.
And when in the summer when we go up to our ranch, and my son and I we go out to the ranch and we have target practice every day. We have competition every day. That's really expensive. He doesn't really appreciate that now. But it's really expensive, and the way to do it now is with iTarget Pro. You can trigger control is where that's the money shot. If you can pull it without pulling the rest of the gun, if your trigger control is smooth and the same every time, you're going to be a good shot. And iTarget Pro lets you do that without spending the money on the ammunition, and you can do it in the living room.
Comfort of your own living room. You can go to itargetpro.com. You can get free shipping and 10% off right now with promo code NEWS. That is itargetpro.com. Really quickly, so Monica Lewinsky was back in the news.
If there's anyone I could interview, she would probably be on my top 10 list. I'd like to interview Monica Lewinsky because she confuses me at times. At other times, she inspires me. She has weathered the storm that I don't think anybody else on earth has weathered that kind of a storm. Here she is, a nobody that, just decided to go in and accept a present from the president and got a little more on her dress. And if the president would have said, okay, yes, I did that. If he had the balls or the honor to say, yes, I did this, she would be a footnote in history and not everybody would know her name. But because he lied about it, her name and now the details of the dress and everything else, that all came out. It was unnecessary. She perplexed me because she's always defended him. And I've always thought that was so bizarre because he didn't treat you well. I don't know if you know that. Yeah. Now she's changing. And she perplexes me again, because now she's claiming she was a victim, when for the last 20 years she said, I'm not a victim, I was a willing participant. But she hasn't
changed that, right? I mean, she's still
She's leaning towards
Yeah.
he victimized her.
Right, like she's
starting to
that
she's starting to move in that direction.
from a power
that's
dynamic.
the trend
Yes.
now.
Yes, I think that's true. It seems to be now. I mean, again, she was an adult, and everyone beat up on Hillary Clinton when she pointed that out. But it's like, I'm sorry, when you're a 21, she was between 21 and 23 in this period. It's like, you have agency at that point. You make your own decisions, and like certainly he's much more at fault than she is, right? I mean, like it's his job to make sure he doesn't screw that up. But she made a decision. She wanted to be involved in this. She even says in the interview that that came out in, what was it, Vanity Fair, was it? That she knew, she obviously knew this went on, and he was denying it. And she still didn't say anything because she didn't want to be responsible for his political downfall. I mean, she was protecting him through that, and like, I know he has to say that wasn't happening through that period, because she was basically in love with the guy.
Yeah.
I mean, so that's a different story. I mean, sure, there's a power dynamic thing, but that's mostly, that's certainly his fault.
So
but it's
We got to take a break.
Okay.
Okay, we'll be back.
quite victimization, though. Right?
No, it's not.
It's like
It's not. But there's
an old-fashioned
two aspects of this. Northern.
We're going to continue that Monica Lewinsky conversation, but have you bought your raffle ticket yet for the M1 raffle to win a Mercedes?
Yeah, it happens this Saturday. You don't have to be present to win. This helps us keep the lights on and pays for everybody's salary and the airplane tickets when we have to go to a hurricane or something. When we raise money, we want every single dollar to go right to the person in need. So once a year we do this. Just go to mercuryone.org/M1ball. Very few tickets. I think we're only selling maybe 1,000 more or something like that. And you can get your tickets. $100 goes to a good cause. Help us out.
$100, you could win a Mercedes.
Right.
It's worth it. We'll see you in overtime.